Tracy McGrady is considered one of the most talented basketball players to ever live. A 6'8" swingman who combined monstrous dunks with some of the smoothest shot making you'll ever see. There was once a time when many believed McGrady was Kobe's equal, if not his superior. With McGrady's superior size and being a year younger, many saw him as the rightful heir to Jordan's throne. But unfortunately for McGrady, while Kobe's stock continued to rise and continued to live up to the Jordan comparisons, McGrady's stock fell almost as soon as it began. He retired ringless and with no second round playoff appearances as a star. Not exactly what you would expect from a player as talented as him. So I wanted to delve into his career, and specifically his playoff career. Was McGrady a playoff underachiever who never belonged in the best in the world conversations? Or was he just unlucky? Or was it a combination of both? Welcome to my channel. I'm CyberTV, but you can also call me Kevin. I'm a sports fanatic. My earliest memory of the NBA was the 2002-2003 season when McGrady led the league in scoring. I still have a memory of watching a pre-game interview with him where the text on screen said that he was that season's leading scorer. I was a little too young to grasp what I was seeing from Orlando TMac, but as a basketball fanatic with fond memories of that era, I believe I can provide a fair breakdown of McGrady's career and what to make of it. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Anyway, McGrady was drafted by the Toronto Raptors with the 9th pick in the 1997 draft, at a time when high school players were seen as high risk. In today's landscape, a prospect like McGrady would be an easy top 2-3 pick, but the NBA of the 90s was physical and was full of teams where the youngest players were a little over 21, a contrast to this century where it's become common for some teams to be filled with teenagers. Because of that, I will not penalize him too much for his Raptors stint. He progressively improved each season and became a 15-6-3 player in his third year as a 20-year-old swingman playing alongside his dynamic superstar cousin Vince Carter. In his first postseason appearance versus the Knicks, McGrady still maintained his averages, but he did so on an inefficient 39%. It's worth noting that by far his best game was Game 1, and that when the Raptors needed him more as the series progressed, he did not respond. After the 2000 season, TMac wanted to play elsewhere and play where he could be the primary scoring option. He chose a Magic team that was on the verge of signing both Grant Hill and Tim Duncan, but at the last minute, Tim Duncan declined, so it was just McGrady and Hill instead, which of course still formed a formidable duo, but one that was rarely on the floor together as Hill took years to recover from an ankle injury they suffered in 2000. This meant that McGrady was often playing short-handed with the Magic, and because of that, I won't penalize him for not winning a ring with the Magic. But what I will analyze is whether he underachieved, whether him not advancing past the first round was justifiable, starting with 2001. In McGrady's first season with the Magic, he averaged 27 points, 8 boards, and 5 dimes on 52 true shooting percentage, which for that time was really solid for a high usage wing, and he led the Magic to 43 wins. Sure, this wasn't a lot, especially in a noticeably weak East, but with Hill only playing 4 games, and Darrell Armstrong, Bo Outlaw, and a rookie Mike Miller being his best teammates, it's very impressive he got them to a winning record. Against a far better Bucks team in the playoffs, McGrady was impressive, averaging 34 points, nearly 7 boards, and 8 dimes per game. But McGrady saved his worst for last, scoring 25 on 26 shots in Game 4 as the Bucks eliminated them in 4. This was a best of 5 by the way, so no sweep, but still. I believe realistically the best case scenario was for this series to go 5, where the Bucks' superior roster and home court advantage would have made them the favorite to advance anyway. I will blame this early exit on bad luck, but it is fair to criticize McGrady for his play regressing when his team needed him most, which is turning into a theme. The 2002 season was basically a repeat of the 2001 season, right down to having the same end result. But this time, it was against a Hornets team with an identical 44-38 record, but also with home court advantage. McGrady went AWOL in Game 1, scoring 20 points on 21 shots in a 1-point loss, but his production ramped up the rest of the series, scoring 31, 37, and 35 as the Magic were eliminated in 5 games. It does need to be mentioned that in Game 3, McGrady didn't attempt a single field goal in overtime, and then the deciding Game 4, most of McGrady's 23-point second half came with the Magic down by at least 10 points, making it a very empty 35 points in a 17-point blowout loss. Ultimately, I do think you can fault TMac for not advancing past the first round here. Sure, the Hornets had home court advantage, and Baron Davis was fantastic this series, but it was pretty evenly matched, and throughout the series, McGrady disappeared when his team needed him most. I will chalk this one up to TMac underachieving. And now the 2003 season. This season is the stuff of legends. Even now, it still gets discussed as one of the greatest non-MVP seasons ever. And as mentioned earlier, this was my first exposure to McGrady in a season where he led the league in scoring and led the Magic to a 42-40 record. The context regarding that record is that the Magic couldn't stay healthy, with Miller missing 33 games, Jurasek missing 55 games, and Hill missing 53 games. Given that context, it's a very impressive MVP caliber season. But then the playoffs happened. Against a 50-win Pistons team, McGrady was incredible in Game 1, extremely productive in Game 2, and performed well in Games 3 and 4. It was enough to take a commanding 3-1 lead against Detroit, which prompted his now infamous post-game interview. McGrady then proceeded to average 26 points, 8 boards, and 5 dimes on 46 true shooting percentage in the final 3 games, all L's, and the Magic were eliminated. McGrady thought he was going to finally get some second round action, but it was simply not meant to be. How much fault should McGrady get for an 8th seed blowing a 3-1 lead to the 1st seed? Usually not a lot, if any blame. The 8th seed team overachieved. But McGrady confidently declared that he was going to advance to the next round, only for this to happen continues a career-long trend of McGrady disappearing when his team needed him most. Because of that, I do penalize him somewhat for how the series went, but I also think the Magic had no business being that close to upsetting the 1st seed Pistons to begin with. Regardless, McGrady just finished his age 23 season and was just about to enter his best years. At least, that's what we all thought. Instead, his 2003 season ended up becoming an outlier, one so different from the rest of his career that it looks like a massive fluke now. Did injuries rob us of more similar seasons, or was 03 never meant to be replicated even if he stayed healthy? It's hard to say, but what's not hard to say is that the 2004 season for McGrady and the Magic was a disaster. The Magic won their first game, a 2-point victory versus the Knicks, but then proceeded to lose the next 19. That is no typo. The 2004 Magic started the season 1-19, a 4-5 win pace a quarter of the way in. They ended the season going 20-42 the rest of the way. A terrible record, but far more respectable than the 1-19 start. McGrady led the league in scoring again, averaging exactly 28 points in an era where that was very difficult to accomplish. But for most of the season, McGrady was hovering at around 24-25 points per game, and his efficiency was pretty bad even for that era. The last 30-ish games, he averaged nearly 32 points per game on higher efficiency, but obviously it was for basically nothing, as the Magic had virtually no chance of making the playoffs by then. It was an extremely deceptive regular season when factoring that in. On the surface, he looked as good as any player in the league, but with context, he was pretty clearly a tier behind Kobe as far as perimeter players go, and also a tier behind the other top tier players that year. And I would argue that applies in 2003 as well, that he was 5th at best, behind any order of Kobe, Duncan, Garnett, and Shaq. Anyway, 2004 was McGrady's final season with Orlando, as he opted to join the Houston Rockets the following season, teaming up with one of the most promising young players in the league in Yao Ming. The Rockets were coming off a 45-37 season, where they went 5 games against a far better Lakers team. They then acquired a 25-year-old superstar wing to pair alongside their young center phenom. Many were expecting at least a championship out of this duo, especially with the Lakers' own duo breaking up. The West looked pretty wide open. The 05 Rockets were a solid team, going 51-31 with McGrady being a big part of why, as he had a strong all-around season and also has legendary 13 points in 33 seconds against that year's champion. But in the playoffs, against a far better Mavs team, he was pretty hit or miss. In the 3 wins, he was masterful, demonstrating that he had the talent to be the best player in the world. But in the losses, he was pretty underwhelming, with 3 of those losses being very winnable games. The most notable loss was the Game 7 40-point blowout loss. At the end of the first quarter, the Mavs were up by 12, and McGrady finished that quarter scoring 7 points on 9 shots and committing 2 turnovers. He wasn't quite as bad the rest of the game, but at that point, it was too late to mount a serious comeback. Even another 13-33 seconds performance would have not saved the Rockets from that massacre. And while it's not exactly fair to blame McGrady for not being a higher seed Mavs team that won nearly 10 more games, it is worth noting that the Rockets had a roster well designed to stop the Mavericks, took a 2-0 lead with both those games being on the road, and proceeded to lose 3 straight winnable games, 2 of them at home, and again had a Game 7 beatdown that demonstrated how far ahead the Mavs were even with it going to 7 games. It's difficult not to pin some blame on McGrady, who noticeably regressed after Game 2. Is it really bad luck if a player as uber talented as McGrady, who now clearly has a championship caliber roster surrounding him, continues these disappearing acts? So yeah, another year, another first round exit, and that wasn't changing, as the 2006 season was a disaster for both McGrady and the Rockets. McGrady suffered from multiple injuries, mostly related to his back, even needed to be carted off one game due to a flare-up, and in the process, he had statistically his worst season as a full-time starter. But oddly enough, McGrady's impact was pretty insane this season, as the Rockets went 27-20, a 47-win pace with them, and 7-28, a 60-win pace without him. Basically the difference between an easy playoff appearance and an easy chance at the #1 pick. I really don't know what to make of the season, other than the insane difference in team record. It wasn't his most productive season, far from it, and it was mainly because of injuries, so the decline in numbers is understandable. But yet, when he was on the floor, the Rockets were playing at playoff level, so I just cannot hold it against him that the Rockets missed the playoffs in 2006, now with that info in mind. Consider it a case of bad luck, a theme almost as common as underachieving when it comes to McGrady. But then we get to 2007 and 2008. 2 different seasons, sure, but I'll condense them because they were extremely similar. Both years had McGrady miss about nearly 15 games. Both years had the Rockets win close to 53 games, and both years ended with the Rockets losing to the Jazz with home court advantage. Up to this point, no McGrady-led squad had home court advantage, and that was a fair reason to not penalize them for never winning a series. But at this point, even with his injury history, the man simply had too much talent in him and around him, and it was in a more than favorable enough position to finally make it to the second round. The Jazz of that era were great, but McGrady was at minimum the most talented player on either team, and this was now his 7th and 8th attempt as the leader of the team to prove that he can advance past the first round. Now he had home court advantage in his favor. The 2007 Rockets took a 2-0 and then 3-2 series lead before losing in 7. McGrady finished the series averaging 25 points on 39%, only leading one game in scoring, which was Game 6. In the deciding Game 7, he was solid, but given how bad he was up to that point, he needed a much better showing. In 2008, McGrady started awful, which allowed the Jazz to take a commanding 3-1 lead. McGrady showed up in the last 2 games of that series, but at that point it was too little too late. The 40-piece in that blowout Game 6 would have been far more useful in Games 1 and 2, and the trend of McGrady's manny inconsistency come playoff time was on display yet again. I'm sure McGrady tried, and I'm sure the injuries contributed, but these 2 series were still very winnable for someone who many believed at the time was Kobe's equal. And speaking of which, with a competent squad in 2008, after years of dealing with a very bad squad, Kobe obliterated the 2008 Jazz, showing just how far apart the gap was at that stage, and honestly how big the gap always was between them. There's not much to add to the rest of McGrady's career. His days as a superstar ended in his injury-plagued 2009 season, which oddly enough was when the Rockets advanced to the second round without him. The Rockets were admirable without him, going 7 against the superior Lakers. Some would argue a healthy McGrady would have gotten them past the Lakers, but I believe a healthy McGrady would have gotten destroyed by Kobe in that series. McGrady's play fell off a cliff after 2009, and he spent the last few years of his career bouncing around from team to team, still struggling to make it past the first round until 2013, when he joined a 58-win Spurs team that advanced to the finals with him barely contributing off the bench. TMac was a Ray Allen 3 away from winning a championship after 15 years of failing to advance past the first round. It's unfortunate things ended the way they did for McGrady, who retired from good after the 2013 season. Meanwhile, the Spurs won it all the following season. McGrady was without a doubt a Hall of Fame talent. If you were trying to create an ideal swingman, he would probably have similar physical tools and a similar skill set to McGrady. There's no doubt in my mind he would have prospered more in this era of basketball, as his unique skill set as an oversized primary ball handler would be better utilized today. But McGrady had a ton of blemishes in his playoff career. A lot of his failings had more to do with bad luck. His supporting cast wasn't always the best or healthiest, he himself wasn't always healthy, and he often faced a better team on the road. But even when the opportunity to advance past the first round was there for the taking, McGrady never capitalized on it, and at some point, blowing those chances over and over becomes more of a mentality problem than simply bad luck. I believe McGrady is a Hall of Famer. In my opinion, he should have made the 75th anniversary team, but I also do not believe he was ever on the same level as Kobe, even in 2003, which has looked more and more like a fluke as time has gone on. As Kobe continued to ascend into basketball immortality, McGrady descended into becoming a player whose Hall of Fame case is still being debated even after he made it in 2017. I'll close this video out with these questions. Was McGrady snubbed from the 75th anniversary team? Was McGrady ever on Kobe's level? What had more to do with his lack of postseason success? Was it his bad luck, or his inconsistent play? I'd love to know. Cyber out.